Church, we're continuing with our series, and if you haven't been with us, you're going to be, for those that have, this is going to be a bit monotonous for you at the beginning, but just again, this is our analogy that we're going with through this series, and it's removing rocks from our spiritual walk with the Lord. In essence, removing rocks from our lives, because it's not like our spiritual walk with the Lord and then everything else in our life. Okay, the Lord is the core of who we are, and that flows through every aspect of our lives. So removing rocks from our spiritual walk with the Lord is in essence removing rocks from our lives. And so there's certain big rocks that get in the way, and if this is our walk with the Lord, there's certain things that stop us from experiencing more of Him, that stop Him from influencing more of our life, from us experiencing His joy, His purpose, but also in Him creating us to be a set-apart people. There's things that we allow to be there that get in the way of that. And so those are the things we've been addressing. It's been encouraging, but it's a call to us to be looking inwards for these things. And so we've dealt with a few rocks, and like we've said, some are bigger, some are a little bit smaller. And so, but when they pile up quite a bit, they do get in the way of our walk with the Lord as well. And so, no problem. We've got the cry room, no stress. There's kids in our service. There's older people in our service. And so the main thing is us just hearing the word. And so please don't feel stressed about that. But church, as we look into this morning as well, and we look at some rocks, I want to remind us that we've looked at rocks of religiousness, where the rich young ruler, that he needed to remove a big rock that was in the way of him seeing Jesus and following. We needed to seek truth and to seek it in Jesus, just like Nicodemus did, but then to believe and follow his truth or his testimony. That's a rock that we've looked at. And also following what God says. And then last week, we looked at the rocks of the heart and the mind. Heart and the mind. There can be many accumulation of things over there. We looked at two aspects over there, but the main aspect was the heart and the mind, and we can hide certain things there, but the Lord is wanting us to know that that's a big deal. That is not just outward sin, but it's things inward. He's concerned about what we're thinking, how we're processing our desires, and how that relates to Him. And so, anyone know what song I'm talking about? The glory of the Lord is coming in this place. And then be careful, little hands, what you do. And then be careful, little mouth, what you say. So only me and Eleanor that know this song? Okay. This morning, everyone else is like, we're not going to sing. Okay, we're not going to. But kind of that song came fresh to memory this morning. Well, not this morning, as I was prepping. And so be careful, little hands, what you do. But also be careful, it's like a kid's song, be careful, little mouth, what you say. And so I want you to keep that in your head this morning, because we're talking about the tongue and our words. So be careful, big mouth, little mouth, whatever mouth we have, be careful mouth what you say. And we're talking about our tongue and words this morning. And again, another kiddies saying that they say in primary school usually, but one that isn't true is, and we're speaking about it during the week, but sticks and stones may break my bones. Not really a song, just a saying, but sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may never harm me. Totally untrue, okay? Because we know how deep words are. Bones kind of heal, but the effects of words in our lives have power. They're profound. And Jen always says to me, if she says to her kids, can you think of one negative thing that was said to you in the last week? It's very quick. People can remember that, okay? Or one thing that stuck with you through your life. We normally think of something negative, that someone has said. But can you think of something positive in the last week that someone said? And there's probably something that's come, but that fades away very quickly. And so we hold on to words quite dearly, and especially negative words. And we're going to focus just on our words this morning. You'll see the sound and media team, thank you to them. We've given them quite a job. There's a lot of verses this morning as we look at this holistically. And so we're not going to cover every aspect of the tongue and of the mouth. Otherwise, I'd keep you here until probably 7 this evening. But we're going to look at a slightly broader and a few specific aspects, and I'm going to mention quite a few verses. So if you want, just be ready and you can jot them down. You can see there's a list over there. There's a few more even, so you're welcome to jot them down and research in your own time. But I'm going to be referencing quite a few verses this morning, and we're starting off with James 3, and we're going to be looking at verses 1 to 12. So if you've got your own Bible with you, but otherwise the team will put it up for us, James 3, and from verses 1 to 12, I'll read for us. So just James in his letter just says, not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. For we all stumble in many ways, and if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body. If we put bits into the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we guard their whole bodies as well. Look at the ships also. Though they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire, and the tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness. The tongue is set among our members, staining the whole body, setting on fire the entire course of life, and set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers, these things ought not to be so. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and salt water? Can a fig tree, my brothers, bear olives, or a grapevine produce figs? Neither can a salt pond yield fresh water. And so just until there for our first passage this morning. And so James, he's quite direct. And a lot of what is said in the book of James is quite direct at us in Christian living as well. Philippians I enjoy as well, just practical Christian living. But James gives us some very pointed words, and we're going to start off with him this morning. Verse 1, he just says that teachers, we need to be careful of those that are teachers, and those that are teachers need to be careful of the influence they have and the words that they say, because they'll be judged more harshly because of what they're saying and the influence of that. So be careful of those words. Verse 3 to 5 shows with an example how powerful the tongue is, and sometimes how reckless it can be as well. So how powerful the tongue is, but how reckless it can be. We see a great forest can be set ablaze by a small spark. And I'm sure those in our midst would know, was it last year or the year before, just the fires that were wreaking a bit of havoc around us on the farms and in the open lands that weren't so good. And you never know how they started, but anything, a small match, a small little spark, a small something starts off such a great fire that can cause such damage. And here James is saying that's the tongue. That's the power that it possesses. Something that can set a whole forest on fire. There's a lot of power, there's a lot of potential for massive damage found in the tongue. Verse 7 and 8, just it's hard to contain or to tame the tongue. And it is interesting how we've been able to tame almost every animal. You know, you see people with crocodiles, you see people with lions and certain things that are hugging lions, and I mean, it's a bit dangerous, and every now and then you see things that don't go well when that happens, but you know, circuses, things like that. Man has been able to, at certain times, tame the biggest of beasts. Yet over here he's saying that's almost not a match for the tongue, because we're not able to tame our tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison, James says. Again, he's just mentioning the potential for mass bad, for mass hurt to abound from our tongues, from mass wrong to come forth from our mouths. Verse 9, he just says, now with this tongue, and yeah, he's drawing on a bit of irony, but with this tongue, we bless our Lord. You know, we worship the Lord, which is a great use for our tongue. At the end of time, every tongue will confess, every knee will bow that, you know, Jesus is Lord, that he is King. And so our tongues, yes, part of our design is to worship the Lord. We've done that this morning. And so we're like, oh, Lord, we praise you. It's a great thing to do with our tongues. But with the same tongue, we curse people made in the likeness of the one that we're praising. And James is going, can you see the contradiction? We're praising our God and Father, and that's great, but then we're cursing ones that are made in his image of the one that we are praising. And so he's saying, surely, in verse 10, you know, from the same mouth blessing and cursing, and surely this should not be. Both good and bad coming from our mouth. And we can probably all testify to that. Even if I ask you to think back over this last week. You know, I said sometimes we ask, okay, did someone say something good or bad about you? But in this last week, if you evaluate your own words, how were your words this last week? How were your words this last month? Usually, we're going, okay, I'm an imperfect person, and even over here, he says whoever bridles their tongue is able to bridle their whole body, and they're perfect, and we know we're not perfect. So this is something we're going to struggle with. Doesn't mean we disregard it. We need to be alert to it, but it is a struggle. Normally, we're going, okay, there is some things that I'm encouraging with. There is some, some good things that I'm speaking into, or truth in certain situations. But yes, there is a little bit of something. And over here, James is just saying, okay, because we've got both of these, verse 10, my brothers, these things ought not to be so. We need to be alert to this. We can't be content with speaking good into situations, but also speaking evil or using our tongue in ways that we shouldn't. Verse 11 and 12 mentions that we don't get fresh and salt water from a spring, or olives from a fig tree, or figs on a grapevine. A salt pond cannot yield fresh water. Therefore, we should not have a difference of our tongue. We should be consistent. Doesn't mean you have to say the same words all the time. Your demeanor, the things that are coming out, the manner that's coming out from your tongue, what you're saying, the fact that it's building up or certain things like that, or even truth in love, that should be the demeanor, not just a open grace, but then something else that's very critical in the same tongue. And so he says that shouldn't be, and that its fruit, James mentions that its fruit shows what it is. So yeah, he's saying you don't get the same, from a spring, you don't get two types of water. From a tree, you don't get two types of fruit. So you see what it is based on its fruit, he's alluding to, and we're going to come back to that later. I want us to look at Proverbs 12:13, because we see the damage that a tongue can do. Proverbs 12:13, an evil man is ensnared by the transgression of his lips, but the righteous escapes from trouble. And so I want us to just see as well that from James's passage over here, we see the magnitude of the tongue. One of the smallest yet most powerful muscles according to its size. Okay, the tongue, how much influence it can have. It can set a forest ablaze, and he's just saying be careful of the damage that can be done. And over here, a man is ensnared by the transgression of his lips. And over there, an evil man. And so our tongue has the ability to ensnare us. And now I want us to look at just at Matthew 12:36 to 37, because we think, okay, yes, the tongue now, we're seeing it as the ability to ensnare us. We're seeing it is a big deal, but is it really, do we really have to watch it that carefully? And over here, Matthew 12:36 to 37, Jesus speaking, I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. That's one of those wake up kind of statements. We're like, whoa. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. But then, for by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Is it a big deal? It's a big deal. That's over here what Jesus is saying. On the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word. Even if I think of myself, like how many careless words do we use? We're not saying missing grammar in a sentence. Okay, we're saying over here careless words that aren't what the Lord desires. We're quite careless with our words sometimes, yet we're going to have to give an account for every single one of those. Not only that, verse 37, by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. So our words are a big deal here. They have a role to play in us being justified in front of the Lord or condemned in front of the Lord. That seems like quite a weighty thing to put just on our words, but this is what Jesus is saying, and we'll see why in a little bit. We'll either be justified before the Lord or condemned before the Lord based on what? On your words. And we'll get to why in a little bit, but just to see that it is a big deal, our words. And what rocks, what kind of words or patterns or using our mouth, what kind of, things in our lives of our words end up being rocks. And we're going to look at a few of those now. So we're going to look at Ephesians 4:23 to 25. What rocks of the tongue do we need to be wary of? So we're going to look at a few categories now. Ephesians deals with a few categories by themselves. So we're just looking at Ephesians a little bit by itself. 23 to 25. and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. And then verse 25. Okay, no problem. I'll get there for us quick. So Ephesians 4 and then 25 just says, therefore, having put away falsehood, let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. And so we see it's building on last week. Remember last week? The heart and the mind. And over here he's starting off saying, be renewed in your mind. Verse 23, be renewed in the spirit of your mind, pursue righteousness and holiness. And then 25, and we'll get to it in a bit as well, is put away falsehood. He then goes on, verse 29, a little bit later, he just says, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give peace to those who hear. So no corrupting talk, no unwholesome, rotten, or depraved language. Okay? Dirty talk coming out of our mouth. And then 31 gives us a few categories where it just says, let all bitterness. All of these have an aspect, some of them just of words, some of them of words and actions, when you look into it a bit deeper. So all of them can relate to words, some of them are words and actions. But here's what Paul in Ephesians is warning us of. It just says, let all bitterness, and it's have nothing to do with these things at the end or cast them off. So bitterness, poison. So this bitter attitude that comes through with bitter words, a bitter aspect on certain things. Wrath, which is outbursts of passion. Again, that can be action or words. Anger, which is opposing or arguing. Continuous arguing, opposing. Clamor, that's just, I get the word blaspheme almost. Comes from two Greek words, okay, blas and pheme. And so it's slow reputation or fame. When you put it together and you're analyzing the Greek what it means, it's slow to call what is good, good. And slow to acknowledge evil. And so a lot of parents will have that with their children, but we have it in life sometimes where our opinion is asked or things happen. And something bad happens, but we don't want to acknowledge it as bad. Or kids come to you, is that bad to do this? Or is it bad to do this? And if we know that it's bad, but we're slow to acknowledge that, he's saying that's slander. Acknowledge what is bad is bad. When Judah gets older, I'm going to have to be like, yes, son, that is bad, don't do that. Okay, not, because then you can continue to do that. And the Lord disapproves of that. But it's also, if something, it's not acknowledging evil in those situations or bad, but also not calling what is good, good. That was a good thing. That was a right thing. It's failing to acknowledge those things. That is slander. And swapping the two. If we call something good bad and bad good, that is slander as well. So we've got to be careful with our words here. Slander is quite deep and we need to be alert to it. Last week we looked at oaths, or not oaths, we looked at the Matthew 5 passage. But just following that in Jesus' teachings is Matthew 5:33 to 37. And so one thing you've got to be alert to, I think the young adults were doing it in their Connect group. They were looking at oaths in Matthew 5:33 to 37. And it's just Jesus speaking. He says, again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. The heart of this passage, when you get to the roots of it, is, in essence, church, don't commit willy-nilly. Okay, don't make promises off the bat that you're not going to be able to fulfill. Don't be a person just full of empty promises, and don't look to promise or make pledges under pressure. Okay, sometimes to get ourselves out of situations, and the young adults spoke about it a little bit, to dig ourselves out of a hole. Oh, if you do this for me, I will. And then we heighten it up because we're in a desperate situation. And we make a commitment or a promise that we might be held to. And so be careful not to make promises, even to the Lord. It's mentioning there. Okay, because it says, back in the day, if you made a promise or an oath to the Lord, you would have to keep to that promise or oath. And he's saying, don't even do that. Don't swear by heaven, don't swear by earth, don't swear by Jerusalem, by your own head, because you don't even have control of your hair color. Even when you dye it, it grows out. Okay? But you don't even have control of that. So he's saying, don't make promises here, or big weighty commitments, just off the cuff, on the fly. Be careful of what you commit to. A rock that we can place is just being quick to commit to things and big things, and then we're held to those commitments. Okay, our tongue is getting us in trouble. It's creating rocks in our walk. Don't be quick to promise. Second thing I want us to look at is lying. And so lying, the Ephesians 4 passage we looked at that I said we're coming back to, it mentions no falsehood, and I'm going to go to Exodus 23 in a bit. But the Ephesians 4 passage mentions, let there be no falsehood, but speak the truth with one another. And so one thing that God calls us to do as well, to move the rocks of lying. Again, this is something that we easily do to get ourselves out of trouble, avoid situations, or make life easier. And so it's a tempting thing, okay? Because it makes life easier. Okay, if they don't find out, or I take a shortcut, or I don't get in trouble, I don't face a consequence for being dishonest in certain situations. And Ephesians said, let there be no falsehood, but let's speak the truth with one another. In Exodus 23:1, it just mentions, you shall not spread a false report. You shall not join hands with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. So don't spread a false report. Lying, and it comes up again, but don't lie even in things that you might have been witness to. Proverbs 6:16 to 19 gives us the Lord's perspective on this. There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood. A heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil. And again it mentions an aspect of this, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. And so we see even mentioned twice there is this falseness, this lying. And so what does the Lord really despise? What does he not enjoy at all? What does he hate? Lying. And so something that easily comes to us, easy to get out of situations, we see that the Lord disapproves of it. And even Proverbs 4:24, it just mentions to put away from you crooked speech and put devious talk far from you. Crooked, so not straight. You got this deviating tongue. And he's saying, put that away from you. Put it far from you. This crooked or deceitful talk, which is not truth, and devious talk, which is deliberate to deceive. Trying to deceive within our talk. He's saying, put that far from you. Again, just to echo, if you want to write down another verse, the team doesn't have it, but Proverbs 12:22 just again mentions that lying is an abomination to the Lord. We must be careful not to distort the truth. Okay? Careful not to distort the truth. Be careful not to say things to get us out of trouble. Say things for ease sake. But let's speak truthful. Truth in love, but truth. Another thing that we've got to be careful of, and this is the last big category, and then we're looking at a few smaller ones before we move on, but is gossip. And that's Proverbs 16:28. And it just says, a dishonest man spreads strife, and a whisper separates close friends. If you look at the Greek whisper, it's a tale teller. I think it is, tale teller. So someone, a tale bearer. So someone who tells stories, who tells tales, who reveals things. And so over here, dishonest man spreads strife, and a whisperer, things that are in secret, goes and divulges or goes and spreads, separates close friends. The passage that we looked at in Exodus 23:1 just mentions that again. Don't spread what? A false report. Gossip, spreading on false reports. Proverbs 21:23 just mentions whoever keeps his mouth and his tongue keeps himself out of trouble. If I'm just able to keep guard over my mouth and my tongue, it's going to keep me from trouble instead of just babbling, instead of revealing. And so gossip is something that we need to be alert to. So we've looked at lying, oaths, gossip, and Ephesians brought up a few things, including slander. And church, just to dovetail that and end it off well, it also includes last week. So I'm not going to go in depth on that. Remember, we looked at the heart and the mind passages, but it was if you call your brother fool or raka, remember that? Brainless, stupid, or the intent to insult. If you call your brother those things, and so it's those careless words again, that we are going to be held accountable for. We need to be careful of that, as well as any derogatory terms. Okay, derogatory term. And Numbers 11, if you want to go and research that yourself, one of the big rocks that we've got to watch out for, Numbers 11, have all been things with each other. Numbers 11 tells us, watch out for your words with the Lord. You can go research that in your own time, Numbers 11. This is where the people start to moan. The Lord takes them out of their slavery, out of their captivity. He's leading them. He's providing things for them. And all of a sudden, people in their midst, and when you research into it, it was people that weren't originally from them that joined in, start to moan. Wasn't life better in Egypt? We still ate better things than just this manna. No, the Lord has taken us here and now He's providing only this for us. We would rather be slaves. And they speak against the salvation that they were asking the Lord to bring them out of, not remembering what it was like. And yeah, they're speaking against what the Lord was doing in their situation, grumbling against the Lord. And the Lord did not look favorably on that. And He calls them to account on it. And so we've got to be careful not to just grumble and moan at the Lord in certain situations. Seek Him and seek His clarity, but be careful of grumbling and moaning against the Lord and His plans in certain situations, or where He's taking you to moan against what He's done when He's provided for you in that situation. So be careful of grumbling against the Lord. Where does this speech flow from? So we've seen a few aspects that this is a serious deal. We've seen a few rocks that we can have in our lives with our tongue that get in the way of our walk with the Lord and just our lives in general. But where does this speech come from? Is it just that we need to muzzle our tongue and not speak at all? Where does this come from if we're going to be dealing with it and dealing with a rock at its root? James 3:12 mentioned that it's a fruit. Said we're coming back to that. He mentioned that it's a fruit. Remember, you don't sticky tape fruit on a tree. Okay, it's a fruit, so it comes from somewhere. And even if we look at Psalm 12:34, if the team wouldn't mind putting that up. May the Lord cut off all flattering lips, the tongue that makes great boasts. Those who say, with our tongue we will prevail. Our lips are with us. Who is master over us? And we see just our words and our meditation it kind of speaks of. Psalm 12:3 and Psalm 12:3-4 there. And I'm not sure if you're able to get Psalm 12:34 as well. No problem. That speaks about, but that one's still on the flattering lips, which is awesome. See how much the Bible speaks about the tongue? That's crazy, and we've got so many verses up today. It speaks about and it links two things in Psalm 12:34. The words of our mouth and the meditation of our hearts. It says, let that be acceptable to you, Lord. The words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart. He's linking two things, but that comes clear in Matthew 12:33 and 34. And this is what I want us to be alert to, is either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad. For the tree is known by its fruit. You brood of vipers, Jesus speaking to the Pharisees. How can you speak good when you are evil? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Where do our words come from? The heart. And so this is why this flows on from last week with our mind and with our heart, because we actually speak of an overflow from what's in our heart. Sometimes we're able to guard it better, but then when we're in tough situations, it bubbles out. But it's a good indication of where our hearts are. And remember, we need to give account for these words, but it shows where our heart is. And so we need to be alert and careful of that, because it flows from within. How do we address that? What are we to do? And here we come to our last slide, and I'll mention verses if you want. I'll mention the verses that these come from, what we are to do. And we'll send that on the church group as well, just so that you can have that with you. But what we are to do, Psalm 141:3, if you want to jot that down, that just mentions, set a guard over your mouth, keep watch of your lips. Set a guard over your mouth, keep watch of your lips. So as we bring this all together, these are practical things we can do. James 1:26 says, bridle your tongue. Think about his illustration with the horse, even with the rudder, and bridle, it It literally was over an animal to guide it, to pull the animal wherever you wanted, to control it. If I want the horse to go left, I pull here. If I want the horse to go right, I pull there. Okay, if I stop, there's certain measures that you stop a horse as well. The bridle helps with that. And so we are to bridle our tongues. We are to stop ourselves, turn ourselves from saying certain things, turn ourselves towards saying other things. Watch what you're saying, control what you're saying. Proverbs 10:19 encourages us to be quiet and again be aware of what you're saying. It doesn't mean that you need to be a mom now for the rest of your life. Okay, that's not what we're saying. I like to talk. Some of us are bubbly people, some of us talk less. We conversate with each other. Conversate, is that a word? Possibly. Okay, but we speak with each other. We enjoy that. That's part of who we are. So we're not saying be mute.